The $200 million fighter jet sat grounded for 3 weeks. 5 aerospace engineers with advanced degrees had run every diagnostic test known to modern aviation. Computer simulations, thermal imaging, pressure analysis. Nothing revealed why the engine kept failing at critical moments. With a national security crisis looming, someone mentioned a name that hadn't been spoken in the hangar for 15 years. When Master Sergeant Jake Rodriguez walked through those doors carrying nothing but a worn toolbox and a lifetime of listening to engines scream, the engineers didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were about to discover why some problems can't be solved with computers. Jake had been the Air Force's most trusted engine specialist for 30 years before one inspection report destroyed his career. Now, at 58, he fixed lawn mowers and boat engines for locals who couldn't afford dealership prices. But when the most advanced fighter jet in the world refused to fly and national security hung in the balance, someone remembered the old mechanic who could diagnose engine problems just by listening. This is the story of how forgotten expertise saved the day when cutting-edge technology failed. If you believe that experience beats algorithms, hit that like button and subscribe, because Jake Rodriguez is about to remind everyone why some skills can never be replaced by machines. Master Sergeant Jake Rodriguez had been living quietly for 15 years in a small coastal town 40 miles from Edwards Air Force Base. His garage workshop occupied the back half of his modest property, filled with lawn mowers, boat engines, and hand tools worn smooth from decades of use. At 58, Jake possessed the gentle wisdom that comes from years of both triumph and disappointment. Few people in town knew about his military background. The faded Air Force veteran cap he wore daily was the only visible reminder of 3 decades spent maintaining the most sophisticated aircraft in the world. Before his disgrace, Jake had been legendary among Air Force mechanics. He'd maintained everything from cargo planes to experimental fighters, but his specialty was the F-35 Lightning II. While other technicians relied on diagnostic computers, Jake developed an almost supernatural ability to diagnose engine problems through sound, vibration, and intuition. The end came suddenly and unfairly. During a routine inspection, Jake missed a hairline crack in a turbine blade, a flaw so subtle that 3 subsequent inspections also failed to detect it. When the blade failed during a training flight, investigators needed someone to blame. Jake's spotless 30-year record meant nothing compared to political pressure. The official report cited negligent maintenance procedures. Jake was stripped of his security clearance, forced into retirement, and effectively blacklisted from civilian aerospace work. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon while Jake was rebuilding a fishing boat engine. The voice belonged to Colonel Patricia Wells, someone he remembered as a sharp young lieutenant from his final years of service. Colonel Wells explained the situation with military directness. The Air Force's newest F-35 had experienced repeated engine failures during critical testing phases. Computer diagnostics indicated all systems were functioning normally, but the engine would mysteriously shut down during high-stress maneuvers. 3 weeks of investigation by the best aerospace engineers had produced no answers. Jake listened as Wells described the technical specifications, failed diagnostic attempts, and growing desperation among base leadership. National security implications were significant. The aircraft was scheduled for deployment to a critical overseas mission. When Wells finished, she added the real reason for her call. Someone had mentioned Jake's name during a staff meeting. Despite his official disgrace, older mechanics still remembered his legendary diagnostic abilities. Would he consider consulting on the problem? The next morning, Jake drove through the gates of Edwards Air Force Base for the first time in 15 years. The guards checked his temporary visitor credentials with obvious skepticism. His worn coveralls and beat-up pickup truck didn't match their expectations. The hangar housing the problematic F-35 buzzed with frustrated activity. Engineers clustered around computer terminals displaying incomprehensible data streams. Diagnostic equipment worth millions of dollars hummed quietly while technicians ran yet another round of tests. Colonel Wells introduced Jake to the engineering team with professional courtesy, but he could sense their skepticism. Dr. Marcus Chun, the lead aerospace engineer, possessed degrees from MIT and Caltech. His team included some of the brightest minds in military aviation, all young enough to view Jake as a relic from a less sophisticated era. Dr. Chen outlined their investigative efforts with obvious pride. They'd analyzed pressure differentials, measured thermal fluctuations, and examined every component with precision instruments. Computer models had simulated every conceivable failure mode. The engine appeared perfect in every measurable way. Jake listened politely while studying the silent aircraft. When Dr. Chin finished his presentation, Jake made a simple request. He wanted to hear the engine run through its complete operational cycle, from startup to maximum thrust. Dr. Chun explained that running the engine to failure repeatedly risked causing actual damage. Their diagnostic approach focused on identifying problems before they manifested, using advanced sensors and computer analysis. Jake nodded, then asked if he could examine the engine housing manually. Several engineers chuckled. What could physical inspection reveal that their sophisticated instruments had missed? Jake approached the F-35 with reverence. His weathered hands moved slowly along the engine cowling, feeling for vibrations, temperature variations, or structural irregularities that might escape electronic detection. The engineers watched with barely concealed amusement as Jake pressed his ear against various sections of the engine housing. To them, he looked like a folk healer attempting mystical rituals. After 20 minutes of careful examination, Jake straightened and made his diagnosis. The engine suffered from harmonic resonance in the fuel injection system, causing microscopic fluctuations in fuel pressure during high-stress operations. The problem only manifested when multiple systems operated simultaneously at maximum capacity. Dr. Chin's skepticism was evident. Their fuel pressure monitoring had detected no irregularities. How could Jake identify a problem their instruments couldn't measure? Jake explained that harmonic resonance didn't necessarily produce consistent pressure variations. Instead, it created brief interruptions in fuel flow, disruptions too quick for standard monitoring equipment to register, but significant enough to cause engine shutdown during critical moments. The solution involved adjusting fuel injection timing by mere milliseconds and installing dampening components to minimize harmonic feedback. Jake sketched the necessary modifications on an envelope, using technical specifications he remembered from 30 years of experience. Dr. Chin studied Jake's notes with growing amazement. The proposed modifications were elegant in their simplicity, addressing issues the team hadn't considered. Implementation took 2 days. The engineering team worked with renewed energy, curious to test whether the old mechanics' intuitive diagnosis could succeed where their sophisticated analysis had failed. The test flight was scheduled for Friday morning. Jake stood beside Colonel Wells on the observation deck, watching as the F-35 taxied toward the runway. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing toward its testing altitude. For 15 minutes, everything appeared normal. Then the pilot began the high-stress maneuvers that had previously triggered engine failures. Jake watched the aircraft execute sharp turns, rapid altitude changes, and maximum thrust operations. The F-35 completed its full testing protocol without incident. Engine performance remained stable throughout every high-stress operation. When the aircraft landed, Dr. Chin approached Jake with obvious respect. The harmonic resonance had been exactly where Jake predicted, invisible to their instruments but devastating to engine performance. Colonel Wells extended Jake's consulting contract, requesting his assistance with similar diagnostic challenges. Other engineers began asking questions about his methodology, eager to learn techniques that couldn't be taught in engineering school. The official review of Jake's original disciplinary action took 3 months. Investigators discovered that the hairline crack he'd missed had been present since manufacturing, invisible to inspection techniques available 15 years ago. His dismissal had been based on incomplete information and unfair expectations. The Air Force offered Jake full reinstatement with back pay. He declined politely, preferring his quiet workshop to military bureaucracy. But he accepted their formal apology and restoration of his security clearance for consulting purposes. Jake returned to his coastal workshop with renewed purpose. Local customers still brought him lawn mowers and boat engines, but now he also received calls from aerospace companies seeking his diagnostic expertise. Jake Rodriguez's story reminds us that expertise isn't always measured in degrees or certifications, and that discarding experienced professionals often costs more than it saves. Sometimes the most sophisticated diagnostic equipment can't replace a lifetime of listening carefully to the world around us. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Everyday Quiet Heroes. Share it with someone who believes that experience and intuition still matter in our technology-driven world. If you or someone you know has experienced similar acts of quiet heroism, please share those stories in the comments. They inspire us and help shape future stories that celebrate everyday courage. Thank you for watching. And remember, in a world obsessed with the latest technology, never underestimate the power of old-school expertise and the wisdom that comes from simply paying attention.